So Phantasm is a really interesting card because people usually either hate it or absolutely love it. It's kind of like a hand trap that isn't a hand trap because yeah, sure, you are special summoning it from your hand whenever your opponent does something, but you're not really hurting your opponent. Instead of that, you're helping yourself out, but I guess you could say that you could be hurting your opponent if you draw into hand traps. But with that said, just realistically speaking, how good is Phantasm right now? So first things first, we can all agree on the fact that Phantasm is not really a card that you're trying to main deck because it's usually dead against any decks that isn't trying to link summon. So for example, against Despia, this card is absolutely worthless. Same for Kashtira and for Purely, unless they're going for like generic link 2s, but you can't really rely on that. So in other words, the goal of this card is to side it so that you can play it against the link heavy decks and actually draw into blowouts. And of course, the longer you hold your Phantasm, the likelier you will be drawing more cards because your opponent might be summoning even more link monsters. As a matter of fact, you always draw at least one card with Phantasm by default, and then for each link monster your opponent controls on resolution, you draw an extra card. But also for each link monster that your opponent controls, you also have to put back one card from your hand into the deck. So for example, if my opponent summons a link monster and I chain Phantasm, I draw 2 cards and then put back 1, and if my opponent summons a link monster while he controls 2 links, I draw 3 cards and then I put back 2. But if my opponent summons a link monster and then I chain Phantasm and on the resolution the link monster is no longer on the field, I draw 1 card and I put 0 back to the deck. So regardless of how you slice it, you always end with the exact same amount of cards before and after using Phantasm. The only difference is that you technically went +1 since you now control a level 7 Dark Dragon on your field. And its on-field effect is actually not too bad because you can use it to try to negate anything that is trying to target your monsters. And of course, you probably made your hand even better because you probably replaced bad cards for good cards. But of course, there is a catch. You are using a monster effect and you are bringing a monster on the field, so you are losing to both Triple Tactic Talents and Thrust. And you know, the current moment, the Unchained deck is notorious for playing 3 copies of Thrust in the main deck and anywhere between 1 to 2 to even 3 copies of Talent in the main deck as well. And you're not really trying to lose to that. Like, you're playing into 2 devastating cards, and imagine if you go Phantasm and then your opponent goes Thrust into D-Barrier and you're playing like, let's say, Despia. All of a sudden, you would completely regret playing Phantasm, and honestly, it's probably the main reason why you would have lost. And sometimes, even if you draw the perfect hand trap or perfect board breaker, if your opponent goes Talent to look at your hand, you're gonna lose it anyways. And the same can be said with hand traps because sometimes they might just never resolve. So you're really gonna have to watch out using this card because just like it can be really good, it can also be really, really horrendous. The good news for Phantasm players out there is that if you don't care about hand traps or board breakers and you're all about gas, this card's really good for you. That way, even if your opponent goes Talents to look at your hand and make you lose a card, you probably have 4 cards that do the same thing anyways after that, so it's all good in the hood. In Rescues, for example, the goal of Phantasm is to replace your bad trap cards that you're trying to set with Turbulence anyways for better cards. And since those trap cards are bad anyways, and you're not even trying to draw them, even if you lose 1 card after the Talents, it's not the end of the world. Your hand would still be better after getting hit by Talents than, before your Phantasm even resolved, which is a good thing for you. Oh, and by the way, just so that we're clear, you actually draw the cards before putting them back into your deck, so you always know what you don't want. But still, to be honest with you, the instances where Phantasm are really good are still kinda limited. It usually varies from anywhere between borderline unplayable because it can't resolve to, not too bad. Honestly, the only thing keeping it away from being really, really good is the existence of Triple Tactic Talents and Thrust. Because otherwise there would be absolutely no drawback to using a monster effect on your opponent's turn. But now you get punished for doing so even if you're not hurting your opponent. So yeah, if the format ever slows down to the point where Sky Striker becomes the best deck, which will probably never happen, this card could be just as good as it was back in 2019 at its prime. I mean, the card was so good that people were even ashing the Phantasm even if it's a neg 1 just because they didn't want you to mulligan and get a better hand. And even the board presence of Phantasm was really good back in the days because you could also navigate your way around Imperm thanks to it. But sadly, these days are probably over. Anyways, that's all I had for this video, so guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and also let me know your thoughts about this card in the comment section below.